Don said he was saying, "Where the F is my food?" I repeat, he said, "Where the F is my food?" He grabbed a black skillet with eggs and tried to hit her over the head with it. Cassie dropped to the ground. The AUSA said, "What did she do?" Don said she went into fetal position. All right, y'all. Day 5 before the weekend was very hectic. We got Don in for a testimony. We finished up Cassie on the stand. They talked to an agent who went inside of Diddy's home. We're going to get into all of that. But for right now, I think it's safe to say Diddy's team came back from the onslaught that Diddy's lawyers put on yesterday and painting Cassie a particular kind of way. But like I said, I feel like every day it just depends whose side you're on, right? Obviously, Cassie is a victim of domestic violence, but I think everybody's asking, where's the trafficking? And that's what the AUSA and the US is trying to prove, right? They're trying to really hang these really detrimental charges upon Diddy. They're not saying that this is just a simple domestic violence case, okay? So we're going to get into what happened this morning, and we're going to get into the afternoon and right before the trial closed for today and for the weekend. So make sure y'all lock in. Let's get it. All right, so for the first half of the day, I really got a lot of notes, so I don't need to really go into a lot of tweets. I do know they planned on finishing the cross today. I think they want to get Cassie off the stand. Y'all know she's pregnant, and I think that's another reason why she went so early, because, you know, she could give birth at any time, okay? But also, they want to hurry up, get her testimony out of here so they can ensure we get everything we need from Cassie, so, you know, she doesn't have any situation regarding her pregnancy while she's on the stand. So they want to get it over with. I heard it was by 4:30 today. Now, everybody's talking about this FaceTime. There was a moment where they were asking her about a time where she hooked back up with Diddy. And they were really trying to push this narrative that, you know, she was breaking up with Diddy and she got back with Diddy. But also, she linked up with Diddy. They had intercourse, and she FaceTimed her husband during the intercourse. Now, this is a moment I see a lot of the people this morning, they weren't talking about. I guess the, you know, media, at least some of the Caucasian media, they didn't think this was an important point to put in a lot of their breakdowns from this morning. So I'm letting you guys know, yes, Cassie admitted to FaceTiming her husband while she was having sex with Diddy. And this is why I'm assuming her and her husband were dating. They weren't married at this time. You know, he's still the trainer and they having this little relationship. And to be more specific about this FaceTime, it says, you know, you write back, "We can embrace, LOL. And you wanted to hug him, right?" Ventura said, "Yes, that's what I said." Diddy's lawyer said, "Did you have sexual intercourse with Mr. Combs that night?" Ventura said, "I did. And during that, your now husband FaceTimed you." Yes. Now, she talked about Diddy at one point in time R-wording her. And we get into that. Your now husband didn't know you were with Mr. Combs at the time. So they're asking about that FaceTime. So you FaceTiming him, and did he know you was with Mr. Combs? Cassie says, "I don't know what he knew." Diddy's lawyer asks, "Okay, well, later, did he discover it?" The AUSA said, "Objection." They said, "Overruled." Estavo says, this is Diddy's lawyer, "You don't know if your husband knew you were R-worded, not that evening." And so it kind of skips and they start talking about this R-word situation. And they kind of, and from the tweets, they kind of move past this. But I did hear people in court today, they talked about, it was a discussion about a time where her and Diddy met up and she said he R-worded her. She told him to stop and he didn't. Now, somewhere in between this R wording, Cassie and Diddy hooked up, and I'm assuming that's when his FaceTime occurred. Another thing that I didn't hear anybody talk about, but I wanted to point this out to y'all because I know everybody's talking about Kim Porter. It says, after Miss Porter's memorial service, you wrote him that you were going home. While he had called Kim his soulmate. Remember, he called Kim his soulmate during the memorial service. I remember a lot of people talking about that. What was the 11 years all about? Ventura said, yes. So she texted him and she was like, oh, you calling Kim your soulmate? We've been together for 11 years. What was that? And so Cassie admits, yeah, I texted him that. Diddy's lawyer said that was hurtful. Cassie said, yes, at the time. Diddy's lawyer say, after that memorial service, you never saw Mr. Combs again, right? Ventura said, I did not. So after the memorial service, that was the last time, Kim's memorial service, that Cassie actually saw Diddy. Diddy's lawyer said, he let you go, right? Ventura said, I never saw him again. I don't know about letting me go. Now, what that sound like to you? Kim passed away after the memorial service. He never talks to Cassie again after he just said Kim was his soulmate. And during that time, I remember Diddy, at least on social media, he seemed like he was really sad. I want to say I didn't really see his spirits pick up until maybe Young Miami came into the picture. But I do remember on social media, I know a lot of people felt like he did something to Kim Porter. But I think publicly he was putting on this front like he was sad. And I don't know if it was a front or not, but I'm just saying we would just hear a lot about Kim. Anytime something came up with Kim, he would make these emotional posts on social media. I think a lot of y'all remember this. And so, after that, he stopped messing with Cassie. Cassie talking about, I don't know if he let me go. I feel like that answer was a little prideful, like she didn't want to admit it. Like, yeah, he kind of dropped me off after the memorial service. Diddy's lawyer said, you got married to the love of your life, right? And then they took a break, but we're going to get into a little more of what we heard from this morning as well. Okay, I'm sorry I'm a little scattered, but here's some more of the notes I had. Now, then we get to another part where they were talking about some of the beatings that Cassie was receiving from Diddy. And at one point she texted him and she was like, yo, when you get effed up, you get crazy. She said, I'm not your rag doll. I'm somebody's daughter. So Cassie and Diddy did have conversations about, how he was treating her. And then shortly after one of these beatings, he texted her and said, I'm horny. So this is after, he didn't put hands on her. And she's like, yo, we need a different vibe than from Friday. Now, Friday is when the beating happened. Diddy turns around and says, F Friday. Almost like he was giving a half-ass apology. And so at this point, remember, she's being crossed by the defense. This is Diddy's lawyers questioning her. And so people in the courtroom are like, how does this help Diddy? This makes him look crazy. It's like he's looking like the crazy hip hop guy. And we're going to get into some jealousy too that they talked about earlier. But how does the defense talking about a text message where he goes from, beating her and then talking about I'm horny and then talking about, oh, F what happened? Like he wants her to forget about it. I don't feel like that helps Diddy if I'm the jury. But this is what Diddy's lawyers kept questioning Cassie about. These are some of the text messages they were going through today. They also said Diddy's lawyers keep forcing evidence without admitting evidence. Y'all know it's a procedure. You have to admit the evidence. They have to know what you're talking about. They said Diddy's lawyers keep just forcing stuff on the screen. And by that time, the jury has already seen it. And so they said it's a lot of sneaky tactics going on by Diddy's lawyers because they want to make sure they're showing, you know, all of this stuff about Cassie in these messages, okay? Like I said, they wanted to push this narrative that she wanted him back after their little breakup. She did text Diddy at one time, sex with Diddy was important. So she was talking about, you know, the freak offs, but she was talking about, you know, sex with you is important. So she was texting Diddy saying that, you know, it was important to her that her and Diddy was getting their freak on as well. But we go back to this jealousy, and it said when Diddy would get jealous, because one time he thought she was having an affair with an NFL player. At one point, he thought she was doing something with Chris Brown because she was supposedly dancing with Chris Brown. And so when he would hear about these affairs, he would take devices from her. And that would be her punishment. Now, at this point, once again, you got people asking, okay, so like, how is this helping Diddy? You're talking about him taking these devices over jealousy, okay? And it looks like Diddy would just get mad and put hands on her whenever he felt like, you know, she was, you know, cheating or she was messing with somebody else. Also, they talked about multiple times, like this one time when he took her phone over this NFL player he thought was messing with her, the police would get called and nothing would happen to Diddy. So they said multiple times they talked about the police being called on Diddy and it didn't lead to any arrest. So I think that kind of paints this narrative, at least to the jury, and this is the defense asking these questions, but if I'm the jury, I'm thinking to myself, oh, like Diddy was untouchable. The police can get called, but, you know, nothing happens. Also, I see a lot of people breaking down a lot of what happened yesterday. A lot of the things that was revealed about her, you know, initiating freak-offs. And even now when we get into the jealousy, I see some people painting a narrative where it's like, okay, did Diddy think Cassie gave it up a certain type of way? Was Cassie, you know, a little promiscuous, right? Was she a little freaky? And did Diddy know, you know, when she gets on drugs, when she gets around guys, she acts a certain way? Because you got to think about it, okay? He has Cassie. She's doing all of this freaky stuff. She's getting urinated on. You know, she's doing the Glock 3000 and all that other stuff. She's doing all of this freaky stuff. Diddy don't want her to do that with nobody else. She's fine. She could get anybody, and she a freak. So I think that's why Diddy will always be so jealous, because he like, all right, I don't want you giving that to nobody else. And I already know when you get high, this, you know, you get into your little freaky bag. So is this why he was so manipulative and, you know, doing so much when he thought she was messing with somebody else? Now, that doesn't excuse Diddy putting hands on her. But, you know, like I said, it's a lot of people in court today that felt like the defense helped paint this narrative that Diddy was, you know, some kind of crazy guy just putting his hands on his girl because he was jealous. Now, we get to another part where I saw a lot of people, they were putting out tweets, and this was wrong. Cassie did not threaten to off Diddy, okay? So it was somebody that they talked about, and they had a video of Cassie. Allegedly, the video was of her playing with herself, or it might have been of a freak off. And so this person was like, you know, I guess offering to sell it, or he was just threatening Cassie with it. So Cassie told him, she was like, look, you need to chill out. You will get hurt. It will be blood, you know, like your blood will be shed. You will be taken out. And she said, it won't be me. It won't be no blood on my hands. So, you know, if you keep going down this path, you will get offed, and it won't be by me. And a lot of people in court felt like she was alluding to, you know, Diddy doing something to this person. Because, you know, she said it won't be on my hands. And so it kind of would make you think, oh, she knew what Diddy was capable of. Remember yesterday we talking about Diddy blowing up Kid Cudi's car. And so, yeah, a lot of people thought she was talking to Diddy and saying she would off Diddy. No, she was talking about this guy who had this video that he was throwing around supposedly of her doing some freaky stuff. And remember, I think a jury might look at that and say, okay, remember, for the last couple of days, she keeps talking about how the freak offs were so, humiliating to her. It was stuff that she was embarrassed of. I think later on today, we'll get to this. She said she didn't even want to take her iPhone to the Apple store because, she didn't know what was on the phone. And she didn't want nobody to see that. It's like, remember when people would take those pictures with the Polaroids and then you take the camera to the CVS to get the pictures published, and next thing you know, it's some freaky stuff on the pictures and you all embarrassed. Cassie didn't want no situation like that regarding her phone. Okay. And so, Cassie wasn't talking about offing Diddy. She was talking about offing some guy who supposedly had a video of her, and it seemed like he was trying to get some money. Okay. Now, also, they talked about how she went to a facility to get help with trauma. Now, the defense was asking her questions, trying to make it seem like, okay, well, did you really go for trauma? And so they was like, well, did you go where they said, does this facility offer stuff about love addiction? She said, yes, but I didn't do that. They said, what about drug addiction? She said, yes, but I didn't do that. So they were trying to basically say, okay, maybe you didn't go there for trauma. Maybe you went there for drugs. Maybe you went there because you was addicted to Diddy or something like that, right? But also she says when she was at this facility, that's when she wrote her book. And the name of her book was called Dark Times, okay? Now, they also talked about a prescription that she would take now, or that she still does take. Now, she takes a drug to help lower the symptoms of her drug addiction. So I'm assuming this drug helps her to not crave some of the drugs that she used to take with Diddy. And she still takes that to this day. Now, a lot of people in the court are like, okay, how does this help Diddy? Okay, this is not like y'all caught her taking drugs. The lawyer was like, well, you still take this drug now. But it's a drug to help her with her addiction. It's not like a drug she's taking to get high. So a lot of people just had a lot of questions about the defense today, and some people feel like they were grasping for straws. Now, this is still the morning time. This is, before their first break from the morning, okay? They also talked about, how she went from saying, hey, I don't want to do freak offs to the next day, she was asking for freak offs with women. And so we talked about that yesterday. Now, also they said in the morning, Diddy's family came late, okay? They said Diddy's family came late. Usually they're there in the morning, but also people were saying today in New York it was raining, so maybe Diddy's family just came in a little late. And so that's all we got for the morning, and we'll skip straight into what happened this afternoon. So after the break, they started finishing up all of the cross from Diddy's attorneys, and we're going to start right here. It says, Miss Ventura, we're almost done here. She said, thank you. So this is Diddy's lawyer. She's reading Diddy's message. And Diddy said, you're going to make a beautiful mother. God bless. Ventura said, I said, thank you. God bless. Ventura said, I wrote, we should talk and have closure. Diddy's lawyer said, Mr. Combs sent back a tear face emoji. He said, you are always my ride or die. Ventura said, I thought it was nice. And as we get into day 5, I feel like Cassie being honest about liking Diddy, having feelings for Diddy. He encouraged me. He could dress. I did love him. I did want to have intercourse with him. That helps the jury believe her whole case. She's not just 24/7 trying to paint him as a monster, in my opinion. So she said, I thought it was nice. Diddy's lawyer said, you've been craving that? Cassie said, before, I don't think I was craving it now. Okay. All right. So I'm going to scroll past a little bit because they had a moment where they were talking about, y'all shaped each other. And then they asked her, you're married to a physical trainer now, and the house you grew up in Connecticut, it was relatively modest compared to this mansion. So I feel like they were trying to say, okay, now you might be bitter. You married to the trainer. He ain't got that type of money. He not living in mansions. And so we get to this point where it's like, you were preparing a tour with Matt Testa. Ventura said, yes, he's an engineer. They said, once you settle your lawsuit, you canceled the tour, right? Ventura said, yes. Diddy's lawyer said, because you no longer needed the money? Ventura said, that wasn't the reason. So here's Diddy's lawyers trying to say, okay, you got your bread. So did you decide you don't want to work anymore? Which, look, to be perfectly honest, I mean, who's really turning up for a Cassie tour? I'm sure she did make more money from, her legal situation than she would if she was touring. Now, that doesn't mean that she doesn't enjoy music, that she doesn't enjoy performing. She could enjoy those things very much. It could be a passion for her. That's why we see people like Beyonce still touring, right? Diddy's lawyers say, after the hotel video came out, you posted on Instagram that domestic violence is a serious issue, right? Ventura said, yes, I still feel that way. I think this is a number for some evidence. It says DX 115 or 1015. Mr. Combs wrote, wanna freak off one last time? What did you write? She said, I don't want it to be the last time. I want to freak off for the first time. And Diddy's lawyer said, no further questions. So I think they felt like, okay, now we just proved that it was some times where she wanted to freak off. And they put up this message. I don't know if it was an email or a text. And once again, Cassie said, after Diddy texted her about, let's freak off one last time, she said, I don't want it to be the last time. I want to freak off for the first time. She said I'm assuming she meant, she wanted to feel like the first time all over again, right? So they said, do you want to redirect the AUSA? They came up. I think they had a little conversation, and it says, you were shown messages today which you and Sean were kind of loving. Oh, were kind and loving. Ventura said, yes. Did those periods ever last? This is Diddy's lawyer. He says, objection. The judge said, overruled. Ventura said, no, they didn't last. They'd turn into a downswing. Remember, he's doing typos. He's typing real fast. So sometimes it's hard to kind of make up what he's saying. The AUSA said, what world did Sean open up to you? Ventura said, a world of chaos. In your 11-year relationship, this is the AUSA, who did you want to have sex with? Ventura said, only him at that time. The AUSA said, when Sean wrote, seduce me all day, what did you do? Ventura said, write about FOS, freak-offs, okay? So I guess he would say, seduce me, so she would send him messages about freak-offs. I don't know what that detailed, but let's continue. The AUSA said, were you able to cancel work obligations for freak-offs? Ventura said, yes, I was told to. Now, also, I feel like Diddy's lawyers, or just the trial itself, it established that Cassie wasn't doing a lot of working. I remember at one point she said she would do small events or maybe like hostings and events if Diddy allowed her to. She talked about doing Honey 3, but how many movies did Cassie do while she was with Diddy? And I feel like I remember seeing her in something, but I think it was after, the relationship with Diddy. But then at the same time, I don't know if I'm confusing Karrueche with Cassie, because they kind of remind me of the same person. Like, I know they don't look alike. If I put them next to each other, I could tell them apart. But sometimes when I just see, pretty little light-skinned girl, I think of Karrueche, who also has done movies. And I'm like, I wonder if I saw Karrueche doing something and I thought it was Cassie, right? And speaking of movies, it says, when you were shooting the movie in South Africa and you blocked him, how did he contact you? Through MIA. I don't know what MIA is. Oh, Mia. Through Mia. I'm guessing Mia is somebody that either worked for her or worked for Diddy, okay? It says, the AUSA, he said he didn't remember hurting you. Did you believe him? Ventura said, not always, because I knew him. There were times he was pretty aware of what he was doing. It's just who he is. I'd seen him be violent with others before. The AUSA says, on the way back from the Canes, What did Sean do? Ventura said he played a video of me having sex with an escort. So this is when we talked about on the plane, and he followed her so he could sit next to her. I think he got somebody to get out of a seat that was next to her so he could sit next to her, and he pulled out a laptop, and that's when he showed her this video. What did he say he'd do? He'd release it. When you got to New York, what did Sean ask for? A freak off, or he'd release it. So this is him saying, if you don't do the freak off, I'm going to put out this video of you having sex with an escort. Now, in hindsight, do y'all think Diddy would have did that? Now, I don't know. Maybe he could have faked it and, said, oh, snap, somebody stole my bag. And, that's how the video got out. But at the same time, I'm just wondering, when I see Diddy being so jealous throughout this relationship, and I'm not saying Cassie was supposed to know this and she should have knew better or something like that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, in reality, he was so jealous, always acting up if he thought she was messing with somebody else. He wasn't going to put out no video of her getting freaky with an escort so other people can see that and potentially might want next. Let's just be real, okay? The AUSA says, when Sean wrote, "You ready for tonight?" what did he mean? Ventura said, freak off. The AUSA said, what were you afraid he would do if you did not do the freak off? The AUSA said, objection. So this is Estavo. The judge said, overruled. Okay. Ventura said, I don't know that week. Also, this wasn't the AUSA. This was another typo by him. He was saying Diddy's lawyers. That's Estavo. And so Diddy's lawyer said objection. The judge said overruled. Cassie said, I don't know that week. The judge said next question. So we scroll down. The AUSA says, do you have any doubt that Sean R-worded you? Diddy's lawyer says objection. The judge said overruled. Cassie says, I have no doubt. The AUSA continues and said, after Sean R-worded you on August 18th, did you later have consensual sex with Sean during which your husband FaceTimed you? Cassie said yes. Okay. So we scroll down a little bit, and this is where they started to ask her about that 20 million that she got. And to be more exact, this is the 20 million she got from Diddy. Okay. When she asked for 30 and she threatened to book, in 24 hours, she got 20 million. And the AUSA said, would you give the 20 million back if you hadn't have had to do freak offs? Diddy's lawyer said, objection. The judge said overruled. Cassie said, I would give it back to get my agency back. The AUSA said, did he beat you during the freak offs? Cassie said, yes. And she started crying. Okay. So she starts crying when thinking about the beating she got during the freak offs. The AUSA says, were you open to freak offs at the beginning? Ventura said, at the beginning. The AUSA said, did you tell him when you no longer wanted to do them? Ventura said, yes, more than once. The AUSA said, what concerns did you have about saying no to freak offs? A safety, career, and love concern. Okay. I repeat, safety, career, and love. So that was her concerns to saying no to the freak offs, all right? So one last time before she went and sat down, Diddy's lawyers ended up crossing her again. And so something that I thought was very interesting was they said, you stated that you were feeling overwhelmed after filing your civil lawsuit, right? Cassie said yes. And remember, these are Diddy's lawyers. You recently received a settlement from the Intercontinental. Ventura said no. The lawyer said, you made a demand. Cassie said yes. 10 million, maybe. 10 million, maybe. Now, maybe she doesn't know the exact amount because let's just say she got 10 million. She got to break that down with the lawyer and the legal team, and she might have to pay some other fees. So, 10 million, maybe. So she did get 10 million from the Intercontinental. Obviously, they didn't help her out. They watched her get beat. And a lot of people were saying she should sue them. So she got 10 million recently. So that's 20 from Diddy, 10 from the Intercontinental. And so the AUSA said, okay, well, I want to ask a couple of more questions. So they came up and they said, why did you keep your devices? Ventura said, I was afraid of what was on them. I wouldn't take them to the Apple store. Then after that, Diddy's lawyers, they wanted confirmation on this $10 million. So they said, one question, you just reached $10 million settlement with the Intercontinental last week before trial. I'm sure this is the AUSA. They said objection. The judge said overruled. Cassie said yes. Okay. So once again, they wanted to establish this as the last bombshell before they went on break. And this is when we get into Dawn. And to be clear, before they got into Dawn, they brought up an agent, and he was one of the guys that did the raid in Diddy's home. He talked about some of the things that were found in Diddy's house. I don't feel like y'all care about that, so I'm skipping right to Dawn. And so they started off by asking Dawn, who she was, what was her connection to Diddy. Y'all know who Dawn is. She was a part of that group. I think it was it Dirty Money or something like that? Yeah, Dirty Money, right? And she was also on Making the Band. I remember they used to always try to hook her up with that light-skinned dude who was probably low-key in the closet. I forgot his name. But anyway, I don't know why I had to say that. But so we finally get to some juicy stuff from Dawn. So it says, who is depicted in this photo? Dawn said, Cassie. In 2009, did you observe an incident between Puff and Cassie? Don Richardson says, yes, she was attacked by Sean Combs, kicked. The AUSA said, did you see more violence by him against Cassie? Don Richardson said, often. So they showed a photo. It was a Dirty Money picture, of the group. And the AUSA said, when were you a member of this group? Don said from 2009 to 2011. The incident in 2009 when Sean Combs beat Cassie, where was it? Don said in Sean Combs' LA home, we were recording. So he beat on Cassie while they were recording. Okay. The AUSA said, what did he do? Don said he was saying, where the F is my food? I repeat, he said, where the F is my food? He grabbed a black skillet with eggs and tried to hit her over the head with it. Cassie dropped to the ground. The AUSA said, what did she do? Don said she went into fetal position. And see, that is a thing that people do when they get abused. They go into fetal position, okay? And I think people are taught to do that when somebody is putting hands on them. So that's a serious thing. And if Dawn saw her do that, I think that will resonate with the jury if you know about stuff like that. And it definitely, it kind of did something to me because I've heard that before. And, it's just something, unfortunately, we see too often. All right. The AUSA said, then what? Dawn said Sean Combs was kicking her in the head and body, then dragged her up to the first floor, glass breaking and yelling. I was scared for her and for me too. The AUSA said, did you intervene? Dawn said no. The AUSA said, did you call the police? Dawn said no. The AUSA said the next day, what happened? Dawn says, now look, this is a typo, so I'm assuming she's saying that she heard from Diddy. And Diddy said that it had been passionate. And he said Cassie was okay. And that it would be better if we didn't talk about it. That people could end up missing. So to me, I feel like Dawn is expressing that Diddy threatened her. The AUSA said, how did you understand that? Don Richard said death. So here's Diddy's lawyers. They say object, sidebar. So they had a sidebar. Now here's the funny thing. Now look. I know the other day people were looking at me like, yo, never gave up. You're reading all this stuff and you're acting so nonchalant like it's not crazy. And I'm like, look, y'all, I've been around the world. Yeah. And I know this judge, he hears stuff like this all the time. But remember, he just heard Don talking about Cassie in fetal position and getting kicked and dragged with eggs and pots and pans. And he says, Okay, y'all, y'all can go home for the weekend and make sure y'all watch the Yankees play the Mets or the Knicks. If you're not into sports, there's a lot going on. See you Monday. And I was like, damn, that felt a little cold when I read it. We get Dawn talking about she was being threatened and the judge like, hey, go home and watch the Knicks. All right, so that was all we got for today. Look, Dawn left out on a bang. I'm sure next week Diddy's lawyers will come back and they'll mention how Dawn is also suing Diddy. I haven't kept up with her case, but I do know that Aubrey, that's the girl standing next to her with the hat on with the stripe on it, the black hat with the little see-through shirt on with the gold shoes. That's Aubrey. She's been talking a lot about Diddy. Okay, she's been hinting that she has some tea on Diddy, and everybody's like, well, girl, if you got something, just put it out. But Dawn is the only one who's actually speaking out and, you know, coming forward. Now, also, it was another member of Dirty Money. I forget that girl's name. She did an interview recently. She sounded like she was on drugs. I'm just going to be honest with you. I think her name is Kalina Harper, okay? And so she did an interview and she was defending Diddy, and a lot of people were saying that she was getting paid off. But we see Dawn, she's willing to speak. Also, I was thinking to myself, have Dawn and Cassie spoke and talked about this potential upcoming trial as well? But it seems like right now Dawn is riding for Cassie and hoping that she gets the justice she deserves, and I'm sure the justice that she feels like she deserves herself. But y'all let me know what y'all thought about day 5, man. I really feel like the AUSA came back hard after it was looking like Diddy's lawyers did something yesterday, and they continued to paint this picture that Cassie was not somebody who was just always in love with Diddy, and, you know, she was this girl who was so hurt that he wouldn't take her seriously. They're saying no, over the course of 11 years, she went through a lot. And like I keep telling y'all, I feel like we in day 5, and the more she says, hey, I did like him. I did think he was okay. He did help me with my career. It was times where I felt like we had some kind of connection, but at the same time, he did all of these crazy things to me. And it goes back to, you know, people do crazy things when they're in love. It might be people on the jury who feel like, okay, yeah, she did love this guy, but he took advantage of her love. I feel like that's what the AUSA is kind of putting out there. But once again, is this trafficking? Is this going to hold up when it comes to the other damning charges that they have against Diddy? I did hear somebody say that they felt like Diddy's lawyers are preparing for Diddy to go down for a few charges, and they've been setting up stuff so they can go into appeal mode. And their only goal is to get Diddy out of jail. So a win for them would be if Diddy does get convicted of a few charges, but they can get him out on appeal and he can fight this case for years, but he's free, that will be a win for them. And you got to think about it. If he fights it for so many years, let's say it's like this situation with the game and how he owed this girl all of this money for all of these years. So recently when it comes out, oh, they're taking one of the game's houses that's worth like $20 million or something like that. No, not $20 million. I'm thinking about Cassie. It was worth like $2 or $3 million, $3 to $4 million, something like that. And it's like, okay, that happened, but nobody's talking about that case anymore because it's been so long since Game, you know, got that case and he had to pay her this money, and she was taking money from his music, taking money from his Cash App. You know, she was trying to get this money for so many years. She finally got this property worth like $3 or $4 million, but nobody's talking about it because it's been going on for so many years. I think that's what Diddy's team might be aiming for, a situation where, okay, yeah, you get him on a couple of charges, we can put out a whole bunch of appeals, but we can get him out of jail and he can fight it from home for years. Let me know what y'all think about that. Like the video and subscribe. I'll see y'all Monday. Peace.